Right. So, hopefully, having an audience will keep me on track in some capacity. Let's see. Well, I say having an audience, that is maybe a bit optimistic here. Right. Ay. Here we go then. The main function of the cardiovascular system in the human body. Okay, so formulation. Cardio, prefix meaning cardiac, referring to the heart. Vascular meaning vessel, or referring to blood vessels, veins, arteries, arterioles, venules, capillaries. Ironically, the pulmonary system, you could argue, is actually distinct from the cardiovascular system in some capacity because, you know, as I say, cardio meaning heart, vascular meaning vessels, and then you've got the pulmonary system, which refers to the lungs and pulmonary circulation. Kirby, hello! Howdy. So my first objective here is to answer the damn question. Because, like me, I have a tendency to ramble in my written answers and in, like, my verbal answers. So I always try and, when I'm answering a question in an academic context, I always try and lead with just answering the question, not elaborating by anything else, and then coming back and rewriting it later. So the main function of the cardiovascular system is, I would argue, to oxygenate the tissues, to circulate blood, hormones, to remove excess carbon dioxide produced by cell metabolism and cellular respiration. Other functions of the cardiovascular system to facilitate or conduct vasodilation, vasoconstriction, to produce pressure variation throughout the vasculature of the body, resulting in blood flow and circulation with systolic and diastolic phases of the heartbeat. So how best to formulate that into a short answer? Kirby, this is my PT qualification. So I am attempting to answer all of these questions in a rigorous academic way. We're going to cite our sources, we're going to do a bunch of research, we're going to read a bunch of articles, and try and answer the questions as succinctly, but in as rigorous a fashion as possible. So it's going to be very dull, but I thought I'd stream it just in case it's of interest to anyone. So I'm just going to we're going to start off with basically flow of consciousness style answer. So, main function of the cardiovascular system is to provide necessary do substances. I mean, it's primarily oxygen to cells and tissues and remove excess carbon dioxide produced by metabolism. Right. So I mean, that's a very basic answer, but at least sort of if I ramble for sort of 1,000 words about various capacities of the cardiovascular system, at least I've answered the question at the start. We can always come back and elaborate further. Right. So, what do we want our main sort of thesis to be, or do we want to do it in block capacities? If we split it into sort of main functions, so let's have one of the main functions as being the availability. Let's do a list, shall we? Availability of oxygen and removal of carbon dioxide. So we can do some research on the functions or the ability to provide that function. I don't want rambling just the answer. Exactly. And generally I ramble quite a lot. I wouldn't call it rambling. I elaborate too much. So I like to have that starting point of answer to the question, and then I can sort of elaborate on various functions. But I'm trying to split it up into different capacities that are provided. I'd argue that pressure gradients and the maintenance of those gradients throughout different areas of the body. We could talk about the different types of vessels that we have, so arteries, arterioles, capillary beds, venules, veins, the function of valves in blood flow, stuff like that. Cardiovascular system, let's talk about vasodilation and constriction as well. Vasodilation, vasoconstriction, which is gonna lead us into sort of blood pressure, because that's one of the main ways that the body manages blood pressure. Let's say as well we're going to talk about systolic and diastolic phases of the heartbeat. Diastolic phases, that's going to lead us into the sinoatrial and atrioventricular valves of the heart. No, those are not valves. Those are, I guess, neuromuscular areas of the heart. Basically, what controls the phase of the heartbeat. From what I see, they want an answer that's about half a page. So I think the guide is, let's see. So my guide here is, for this answer, 250 to 950 words. So that's what we've got to get. So a few paragraphs should be good. But we've got to remember as well that if we're making claims about a certain function or capacity, we need to back that up with citations. And we're doing it in the Harvard citation style, or Harvard referencing style. So we have to make sure that we format that correctly as well. So let's see, availability of oxygen, removal of carbon dioxide, pressure gradients. Let's add circulation to pressure gradients. Vasodilation, vasoconstriction, blood pressure, systolic and diastolic phases, sinoatrial node, atrioventricular. I guess we could talk about the categorization of the circulations of the cardiovascular system. So you've got systemic circulation, and you have I guess it would be cardiac circulation. Systemic pulmonary cardiac, I think. So these are the different circulations that are produced by the heart. Should we talk about adaptations? No, it says main function. It's odd that it really should be main functions, because boiling down the cardiovascular system to a single function is really quite difficult. I guess, you know, this is the best answer to the question as written. Main function is to provide necessary oxygen to cells and tissues and remove excess carbon dioxide produced by metabolism. I mean, you could leave it at that, and that does answer the question, which is nice. But let's leave it at what we've got for now. That's a fairly good summary of the main functions. I don't think I'm missing anything major. Let's take it from a sort of a layperson attitude, see if that opens any doors. So what does the heart do? Heart pumps blood. Cardio is typically associated with running, endurance. Oh, energy systems. We could talk about aerobic and anaerobic energy systems, although that is moderately off topic, because that's, I mean, it's kind of tangential to the cardiovascular system, really, I would argue. Okay, let's leave it at that. So we're going to research each of these topics and see if we can come up with some citations for each of them, or see if we can just learn a little bit about what the current academic literature is saying about each of these things. So we're going to go to Google Scholar to start with, and let's see what we can find. So, availability of oxygen, removal of carbon dioxide. Let's see, what's a good way to formulate this? Availability of oxygen, oxygenation of tissues, human body, removal of carbon dioxide. Oxygen, carbon dioxide gas stores of the body, tissue, oxygen, carbon dioxide stores in breath hold, simultaneous blood tissue exchange of oxygen, carbon dioxide, bicarbonate, regulation of tissue oxygenation. That might be interesting. See, this is on Google Books. Regulation of carbon dioxide. Okay, let's see. Design of the cardiovascular system, hemodynamics. Hemo is a prefix meaning blood. Flow of blood in single vessels. Structure and function of microcirculation. Transcapillary exchange of solutes. Regulation of blood flow. Mechanisms of local regulation. Respiratory system. Oxygen transport. Gas laws. Gas exchange and diffusion. So that would be pulmonary specific, I would imagine. Although capillaries do gas exchange via diffusion, I believe. I'd rather have a study than a book, I think. Although, could certainly cite this book, but maybe later when we have something more specific that we're looking to talk about. Passive model of the heat, oxygen, carbon dioxide transport. Ooh, okay. Let's see if ChatGPT can point us to anything. I'm looking for some academic journal articles talking about the function of the cardiovascular system to, let's see, provide oxygen to cells and tissues and remove carbon dioxide. Let's see. Oxygen transport and exchange in microcirculation, that's in PubMed. Physiology of oxygen transport by the cardiovascular system, that seems relevant. Physiology of oxygen transport, assessing cardiac function by gas exchange, oxygen transport in the microcirculation and its regulation, red blood cell aggregates, transport for finite concentration. Volume of healthy red blood cells is optimal for advective. I'm not familiar with that term. What does advective mean? Always take an opportunity to learn. Let's see. Define advective. Describe something related to advection, which is the transport of heat, moisture, or pollutants by the horizontal bulk movement of a fluid like air or water. Essentially, it's carrying along. Oh, interesting. Advection. Cool. Okay. Additional useful resources, physiology text and reviews. Okay, let's have a look. We get the full text, that'd be nice. Some of them are behind a paywall, but we'll see. This looks like it's just the abstract. Let's have a look, we might be able to cite it anyway. The author expresses appreciation to the organisers, yada yada. Okay. Cardiovascular system is responsible for maintaining adequate convective delivery of oxygen to the smallest branches of the network of blood vessels, microcirculation, from which oxygen passes to the parent. Ooh, I'm not familiar with that word either. Let's see. Define.
Parenchymal.
What was that?
Parenchymal.
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 Okay. Relating to or affecting the functional tissue of an organ. Parenchymal.
Parenchymal.
Minimal or no parenchymal fibrosis is present. Okay, so that fibrosis would be inflammation of fibers. Okay. Well, we were on this one. By passive diffusion. So diffusion is the basically passive transfer of gases from one side of the membrane to another. Passive just means that energy is not being used. The aim of this brief review is to trace the development of the study of oxygen transport from the point of view of microcirculation. August Crow performed measurements that allowed him to use his keen insight to draw conclusions about oxygen transport that remained the foundations of this field for decades. After an extended period of neglect, Darling rekindled interest in the field of oxygen transport by discovering that substantial amounts of oxygen diffused from the arteriolar network. Subsequent investigations confirmed this finding in various vascular beds and extended these studies to capillaries and venules. The important contributions of computational modelling and new techniques in intravital microscopy continue to lead to more advances in our understanding of the role of microcirculation in the supply of oxygen to tissues. Current work is applying the concepts and principles learned in normal tissues to the pathophysiological situations, as well as increasing our understanding of artificial oxygen carriers, oxygen sensing, and the connections between nitric oxide and oxygen transport. Nitric oxide, I believe, has the primary function of, is it vasoconstriction or vasodilation? Function of nitric oxide. Potential molecule that acts as a signaling gas primarily by relaxing and widening blood vessels, so vasodilation. Cool. Cool. Okay, cool. Just the abstract of that. Let's have a look. Don't have access to the full studies on any of these thus far, unfortunately. I would like to read some methodology and conclusions. The heart, vascular system, and red blood cells play fundamental roles in O2 transport. Fascinating research history that led to the current understanding of physiology of O2 transport began in ancient Egypt in 3000 BC, when it was postulated that the heart was a pump serving a system of distributing vessels. That was in 3000 BC, goddamn. Over 4 millennia elapsed before William Harvey, that's a name I should research, William Harvey, interesting, made the revolutionary discovery of blood circulation. But it was not until the 20th century that a lucid and integrated picture of O2 transport finally emerged. This review describes major research achievements contributing to the evolution of knowledge. These achievements include the discovery of the systemic and pulmonary circulations, hemoglobin within red blood cells and its ability to bind O2, and diffusion of O2 from the capillary as the final step in its delivery to tissue. The authors also described the classic studies that provided the initial description of the basic regulatory mechanisms governing heart function. Frank Starling law. I'm not familiar with that. That's another one for the research. Right. Notepad. Fucking lost connection. Lost connection on the laptop because I decided to download yesterday's stream. How dare you? Downloading things from Twitch? Bold. Okay. So, a couple of things to research. We want to research Frank Sterling law and William Harvey. And the flow blood gas analyzer and oximeter and the radioactive microsphere technique. Okay, my word, we're getting a lot of things to learn about right here. Okay, to measure the regional blood flow in facilitating O2 transport-related research is recognized. The importance of technical advance. Okay. The authors described how religious and cultural constraints, as well as superstition-based medical traditions, at times impeded experimentation and the acquisition of knowledge related to O2 transport. I mean, there are examples of this even as far forward in some research as like Da Vinci, because I mean, Da Vinci was doing. Was it Da Vinci? Who was it? There was an early anatomist who was doing dissections and he was basically halted on pain of death by the Pope at the time. And his dissections actually afforded a large amount of knowledge. I don't know how to set my Twitch to publish my vids like yours. So all I do is I go to my Twitch dashboard and I go to Content, Video Producer, and I click on the dots, I click Export, and I have it connected to YouTube, and I just click Export and it publishes it for me. I'm curious, Tank Commander, you've got a decent amount of knowledge. I don't know if it extends to sort of historical historical context with regards to anatomy. But there was an anatomist that I remember hearing about who was halted in his dissections by the Pope. I think Leonardo da Vinci he did very detailed art of the human body, sort of some of the earliest depictions of like really detailed anatomical drawings was by Da Vinci as a result of vivisecting pigs. Doesn't sound like something Da Vinci would be involved in. He was a mechanical inventor. I remember the name Da Vinci associated with, let's see, Da Vinci anatomical drawings. Let's see. Leonardo da Vinci anatomical drawings. Yeah. I mean, look at these. These are these are astounding. And these as I think were these. Yeah, it even sketched trabeculae, which are structures originating from the, I believe, trabeculae. Are they specific to lymph nodes? I'm not sure. Yeah, Leonardo's anatomical investigations carried out first on a pig and oxen hearts, then later in hasty dissections in winter cold on human specimens. So, this is astounding. I fucking love this, dude. Look at that. That's fucking beautiful. Look at these. Oh my god. That's incredible. Oh, I should get a book of these drawings, dude. See, this is what I do in my answers. I get so off topic. Oh, so cool. Exactly, Kirby. I need to not get distracted, but I mean, you can't argue that these aren't feckin' awesome. Oh my lord, that's so cool. Okay, so let me answer my question. Which anatomist's work was halted by the Pope at the time? Yeah, it was Da Vinci. Around 1513, while working in a hospital in Rome, Leonardo's anatomical studies were stopped by a papal decree issued by Pope Leo X. The exact reasons are debated by historians, but sources suggest it was not a universal ban on dissection, which the Church often permitted for educational purposes, but rather related to accusations of unseemly conduct and his theological speculations on the soul of the embryo, which conflicted with church doctrine at the time. Interesting. Essentially a study on it. Understanding of human anatomy explores the contributions made by Vesalius and his contemporaries in the first half of the 16th century. When was the legalization? Because there was literature at one point, or there was a law passed that got anatomists the bodies of executed murderers, I think, right? When were anatomists given the bodies executed murderers? Yeah, 1832, the Anatomy Act, also known as the Warburton Anatomy Act, is an act of Parliament of the United Kingdom that gave free license to doctors, teachers of anatomy, and bona fide medical students to dissect donated bodies. Wow. Before 1832, the Murder Act stipulated that only the corpses of executed murderers could be used for dissection. Oh, wow, it was to enable... Interesting. Cool. Being you are doing this, I think there's a study category on Twitch you could do. Oh, really? I did not know that. I'll have a look. Is there a... I'm getting distracted while trying to answer a question? Study... I don't think there's a study category, is it? Is there? Stuck together? I don't think so. Most of early anatomists did secret unboxing videos. Oh dear. Okay, alright, let's get back to answering the question. This is what I do. I find something interesting and I go on complete tangents. Okay. So, did we read this one? Yes, we did. Physiology, I believe we read this one. Oh no, we did, because we noted down points of research. But I think... Okay, and the flow of blood... Yeah, the authors describe how religious and cultural constraints, as well as superstition-based medical conditions, at times impeded experimentation and the acquisition of knowledge related to O2 transport. Assessing cardiac function by gas exchange. Do we have the full text of any of these? I would like to see the methodology. Dang it, I don't want to buy an article. I'm too poor to buy an article. Okay. Exercise stresses the primary function of the cardiovascular system, which is the supply of O2 and removal of CO2 from cells of the body. This is nice, actually. It might be worth dropping this as a citation for our original, just concise answer here. Let's get my bib up and start a reference list, shall we? We're doing it in Harvard style. Yada yada yada, new project. Let's just name it Block 5 for now. Oh, Block 5. Cool, new reference. What are we referencing? This gentleman. We can use the DOI. Okay. Cool. Gets a credible rating. How nice. URL. Use DOI, I believe. Access today. Cool. And let's do a simple in-text citation. Hello, Kevin! Howdy. By the way, if anyone else wants to look at these questions, it's from 1988. Might be a bit early as a citation. That's what, like, almost 40 years ago? I reckon we can probably do better than to cite a 40-year-old study. Although, given that this is so broad, like, generally, advances in science add sort of nuance, not broad overview. So we'll leave it as a 40-year-old study citation for now, just because it's so broad. But if we get in further research that we do, if we get a more modern study citing the same thing or covering the same thing, we'll update it. Exercise stresses the primary function. Even ordinary walking requires an increase in O2 consumption, CO2 production by exercise. by the exercising muscles are 20 times the resting level. And people debate with me when I say that walking is one of the best ways to lose weight. Bitch! While pulmonary dysfunction may affect arterial blood gas tensions, the dynamics of O2 uptake and CO2 output by the lungs depend on the circulatory responses to exercise. Thus, measurement of the dynamics of O2 uptake in response to exercise has been shown to reflect cardiovascular function. Inability of the circulatory responses to meet an increased O2 requirement may be reflected in abnormalities in O2 uptake dynamics and an increase in CO2 output relative to O2 uptake consequent to bicarbonate buffering of lactic acid. Application of currently available technology for the continuous measurement and analysis of pulmonary gas exchange can afford the practicing or investigative cardiologist with a non-invasive and inexpensive means for accessing cardiovascular function or assessing cardiovascular function. Interesting. None of these... So let's get back to our question. We're only on the first... first sort of subtopic here, which is the availability of oxygen and removal of carbon dioxide. What would be the nuance that we're looking to provide to this particular function? If we're formulating this answer, right, and the answer being, what is the main function of the cardiovascular system in the human body? We've already listed the main function. Now we're looking at sub-functions, or we're looking to add nuance to those. So the main function of the cardiovascular system is to provide necessary oxygen to cells and tissues and remove excess carbon dioxide produced by metabolism. We want to expand on this but not repeat ourselves. So the methods, the functionality, we want to talk about the vasculature and how the oxygen is provided. So if we look at it from a... so let's look at order, right? So should we talk about pressure gradients? How much should we include the lungs? Because if we're talking about oxygenation, that really starts at inhalation, right? That starts at the flattening of the diaphragm, the expansion of the chest, the expansion of the lungs, creating low pressure, which causes the weight of the atmosphere to push air into the lungs, at which point it goes into the bronchus, the bronchioles, heads towards the alveolar, at which point pulmonary capillaries pass close to these alveoli, resulting in passive gas exchange, whereby the carbon dioxide and oxygen are exchanged, blood is oxygenated, and oxygenated blood then travels out through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium, through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle, then passing from the aortic valve into the aorta and systemic circulation. So, I mean, we can go very sort of 1, 2, 3, but it's a question of how useful that is. I think that's probably the best way to go about this, actually. Is to, instead of sort of arbitrarily discussing all of these points, is to sort of put them in order. Right, so if we have a list of 1, 2, 3, and we're going to try and formulate these points that we have here into a literal chronological order. So let's do pressure first, shall we? Let's talk about pressure gradients, or we should specify pulmonary pressure, because that's essentially breathing and aspiration. And I guess we end again with pulmonary pressure. So, pulmonary pressure, then we talk about gas exchange. Pulmonary pressure, gas exchange via diffusion. Then we talk about the oxygenation or blood oxygenation, but that is just diffusion. Still on the first question, yes, indeed. Gas exchange or diffusion. Then we should talk about systemic circulation. Or should we start at the inferior and superior vena cava? Because that's going to start us at the actual systolic and diastolic phases. That way we don't have to sort of end halfway through a cycle, I guess. So let's talk about inferior superior vena cava, level of the heart at the iatrium. Iatrium through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle, and then the pulmonary semilunar. God, my dystonia makes this difficult. Pulmonary semilunar valve, and then into pulmonary circulation, which leads us nicely into pulmonary pressure. After pulmonary pressure, that's our respiration, inhalation. We then talk about gas exchange, which is the oxygenation of blood. We then talk about the left atria. We should also specify the sinoatrial and atrioventricular nodes. So these are basically the specialized neuromuscular tissue that organize the phases of the heartbeat, so the systolic then diastolic. It's a question whether we want to include those in the chronology sort of format that we're working on here, or whether we leave them out and then include them in the conclusion, because they can be talked about as their own sort of topic. But where would I include them if I'm doing chronological? So I guess when we talk about pulmonary pressure and oxygenation, it's after a systolic contraction which pushes the deoxygenated blood into the pulmonary arteries for oxygenation, and then a diastolic or relaxing phase of the ventricles that would be when the atria are contracting. So it would be a relaxing phase of the atria where the blood is passing into the left atrium, at which point you would have... We should search the sinoatrial node and the exact... Because I know it passes an electrical signal down the septum or the walls of the heart to the ventricles, causing them to contract. But I don't know the exact function of the atrioventricular node and whether that's considered it wouldn't be considered a valve, but I do need to do more research about it. We'll leave the SA and AV for a conclusionary topic. We'll sort of wrap up talking about the phases of the heartbeat and covering the SA and AV at the end, I think. So we're on the left atria. This is after gas exchange. Left atria to left ventricles, then passing into systemic circulation, at which point we're talking about finally aorta. Why have I forgotten the name of the bloody trunk? Brachiocephalic trunk, providing to the right subclavian valve, the not valve, right subclavian artery, like jugular artery. Jugular artery? I can't remember the exact name. But systemic circulation is circulation to tissues, so this is when we talk about the oxygenation of tissues. So systemic circulation, oxygenation of tissues. All right. Gas exchange, diffusion, removal of CO2. Removal of CO2, expansion. So that would be the expansion of the diaphragm and the breathing out. Oxygenation of tissues. And then we can talk about the arisal of venules from capillary beds. So venules to veins to the inferior and superior vena cava, and that leads us nicely back into a good cycle here. Lovely. Okay, so and I guess instead of pulmonary pressure at the end, we can talk about the negative pressure found in the large veins near the heart. So sort of negative vein pressure near heart. Okay. So, chat, we are almost ready to start formulating our answer. How exciting! It only took me like an hour. So, we're going to talk about the inferior and superior vena cava. Let's see. As any circulatory system is by definition cyclic, picking a starting point for explanation is somewhat arbitrary. However, I mean, is that... Because, I mean, the starting point, I guess, would be the sinoatrial node. I need to do some more research on the sinoatrial node and its actual functioning. So let's have a look. See if ChatGPT can point us to any literature that we might be able to learn something from. This is, I feel like one of the best use cases of ChatGPT is not getting it to tell you the information, because let's be clear, ChatGPT makes shit up. So always tell ChatGPT to cite you something else. Don't ask. There've been examples of like lawyers using ChatGPT to cite case law and stuff like that, but they don't actually ask it to link. And it just makes it up. It's like, okay, so find some academic literature discussing the structure and function of the sinoatrial and atrioventricular nodes of the human heart. Alright, let's see. What can you find me? Anything interesting? Structure-function relationship in sinoatrial and atrioventricular nodes. SA node, physiology and structure. Human sinoatrial node. Review. Okay, interesting. Ooh, pacemaker activity. Okay, development of the cardiac conduction system. Other useful peer-reviewed articles. Some your key concepts. Atrioventricular nodes. Functionally slows conduction from atria to ventricles, ensuring proper timing for ventricular filling and contraction. May serve as a secondary pacemaker under SA node failure and exhibits distinct ionic and coupling properties. So what is an ion again? An ion is an atom that contains an atom or a group of atoms that contains a positive or negative charge. Yes? Am I? I want to be right without asking if I'm right. We'll have a look later. Okay. So let's see. Do we have the full study? I think. Do we? Maybe. It's not a study. Is this a review? We'll see. View on publisher site. Let's have a gander, chap. Roger that, Peabody. Recently published optical mapping studies of larger mammals, including humans, have identified functionally discrete sinoatrial exit pathways of activation. This is in line with earlier mapping studies of the dog and the human, but in contrast with findings in the mouse and the rabbit, wherein a propagation wavefront pattern of activation has been described. It underpins the complex three-dimensional organization of the cardiovascular or the cardiac pacemaking and conduction system in the larger species, wherein sinoatrial and atrioventricular nodal physiologies both demonstrate identifiable activation pathways which coincide with anatomical landmarks and histologic architecture. So that in addition to muscle fiber orientation and cell coupling, these intrinsic factors act to determine excitation pathways. This complex 3D organization increases the effect of source-to-sink mismatch. I'm not sure what that refers to. Source-to-sink mismatch, both by greater variability in the space constant of tissue and by the 3D projection of this effect in all directions. So it sounds like it's talking about the electrical signal originating from the sinoatrial node coming out in all directions rather than just in a sort of linear or 2D fashion down a septum or down into the walls of the ventricle. Mathematical modelling provides a means to study these interactions, and newer models should incorporate additional factors and their effect into the 3D structure of large mammal physiology. Interesting. Okay, let's see. Can ChatGPT tell me, can you explain this sentence? See if it gives me any insight. Source-sink mismatch, here we go. The group of electrically active cells generate depolarizing current, e.g. pacemaker conducting cells, sink. The surrounding tissue that receives this current must be depolarized for the impulse to propagate. That does make sense. A source-sink mismatch occurs when the source cannot generate enough current to depolarize the sink, slowing or blocking conduction. Okay, gotcha. So sounds like this is the case where you would use an external defib or something like that, a shock, because a lot of people don't know you don't shock a heart rhythm that is non-existent. So if someone's heart has stopped, chest compressions, chest compressions, chest compressions. You don't have the defib, right? The defib is for an irregular heart pattern, right? As opposed to a heart that's completely stopped. If someone does not have a heartbeat, do not shock them. Chest compressions, chest compressions, chest compressions. Yeah. Okay, cool. Cool. Wait, I don't have the full study here? Or do I? Hello? Full study, please. Damn you, citations! Okay. Physiology of sinoatrial node. Martin Flack, medical student, was the first to discover the sinoatrial node in the early 1900s. The SA node represents a cluster of myocytes with pacemaker activity. Sinoatrial node represents a cluster of myocytes with pacemaker activity. So what is the actual definition of pacemaker? I mean, it sounds self-explanatory, but there may be a specific anatomical definition. Okay, in anatomy. Pacemaker refers to... Okay, so it specifically refers to the sinoatrial node as opposed to the function of the node, by the sounds of it. Definition of pacemaker. Small electrical device, pacemaker implantation. An electronic device that is implanted into the body to monitor heart rate and rhythm. It gives the heart electrical stimulation when it does not beat normally. Interesting. So, So it can be an external device, but it can also be, like the sinoatrial node is literally a pacemaker. Okay. Although this is generated by AI, so it's difficult to know for sure, right? But we'll work with that as a working definition. Can we give a better answer? Is the SA node literally a pacemaker? Has it even given you a source? Exactly. Right? That's why I'm hesitant to... Sinoatrial node is an oval-shaped region of cardiac muscle in the upper back wall of the right atrium, made up of cells known as pacemaker cells. Okay. National Institute of Health. That seems like a credible source. What are pacemaker cells? Cardiac pacemaker cells. Okay. Sinoatrial node action potentials. Cells within the SA node are the primary pacemaker site within the heart. These cells are characterized as having no true resting potential, but instead generating regular spontaneous action potentials. Unlike non-pacemaker action potentials in the heart, the depolarizing current is carried into the cell by relatively slow Ca current. Ca++, I'm not aware what that means. Instead of by fast Na currents. So Na is sodium, yes? Ca is carbon, I think? No, carbon is just C. Calcium ion, okay. Interesting. Cool. There are, in fact, no fast Na channels and currents operating in SA nodal cells. It results in slower action potentials in terms of how rapidly they depolarize. Therefore, the pacemaker action potentials are sometimes referred to as slow response action potentials. SA nodal action potentials are divided into 3 phases. Phase 4 is spontaneous depolarization that triggers the action potential, once the membrane potential reaches a threshold between -40 and -30 MV. What unit of measurement is MV? Mitral valve. Oh, shut up. Ah, bugger off. Okay. Unit of measurement is an abbreviation for minute ventilation, which is a measure of lung function. See, generally when it comes to definitions, AI is mostly reliable until it gets to very sort of nuanced stuff. Can I refer to the mitral valve unit of measurement, liters per minute? Oh, minute volume, okay. So potentially the amount of volume passing through a particular area over a minute. That would seem to be consistent. -40 and -30 MV. Phase 0 is the depolarization phase of the action potential. This is followed by phase 3 repolarization. Once the cell is completely repolarized at about -60 MV. -60. How would a flow rate be negative? Liters per minute. How would that be a negative value? Unless we're talking about it being relative to... That's weird. I have farted. Farting is educational, chap. Channel was opened, yada yada yada. Seriously, what is MV in this context? Because the suggestion is that it's, say flow rate or minute ventilation, but I don't understand how that could be a negative value. Like, surely 0 would be the smallest value that you could get for a flow rate, unless you're talking about that backflow, which doesn't happen in the heart by definition. So it seems odd that there would be a... Or maybe it's talking about negative flows of ions? Oh, it's not talking about minute flow of blood. It would be flow of ions or potential, isn't it? Okay, that makes more sense. Interesting. Okay. Right. I don't think any of this is going to be particularly helpful further to what I've already learned. Right, where are we at? So, the sinoatrial node is the pacemaker, essentially. What about the atrioventricular node? That would seem sinoatrial node. Do we have a study specifically on the atrioventricular nodes? VCS, atrioventricular. Yes, this is the one. Right, in the normal heart, a fully mature atrioventricular node becomes the principal electrical conduit between the atria and the ventricles. This node defines the delay in ventricular activation and can act as a secondary pacemaker if the sinoatrial node fails. The delay of conduction at the atrioventricular node is necessary for the sequential contraction of the atria and ventricles, ensuring optimal hemodynamics. So this is, basically the heartbeat. You have the sinoatrial node producing that depolarization, which results in the conduction of this of these ions, which triggers the contraction of the atria, at which point you have the conduction of this, or the, don't know whether conduction's the right word, but triggers the electrical signal to travel to the atrioventricular node, which then responds to that, producing the contraction, the characteristic lub-dub of the heart, right, which is caused, I believe, by the tricuspid and bicuspid valve contracting. And then that would cause the lub, and then the dub is caused by the pulmonary semilunar valve and the aortic valve closing. So the sinoatrial and atrioventricular nodes control the rate at which these happen sequentially, which is why when you have a abnormal electrical rhythm in the heart, it can be very dangerous, because you can get atria or ventricles contracting when they shouldn't be, instead of dilating when they should be, or vice versa. Okay, cool. So, how best to formulate that into an explanation here? As any circular joint system is by definition cyclic, picking a starting point for explanation is somewhat arbitrary. However, somewhat arbitrary. I don't think this is necessary. We can just choose a place to start. Let's start as blood arrives at the heart via the inferior superior vena cava. Assisted by negative pressure gradients within these vessels. It's probably a better way to format this other than brackets. As blood arrives at the heart via the inferior and superior vena cava. What's a better way of formulating that sentence, chat? What do you think? As blood arrives at the heart via the inferior and superior vena cava, I'm going on to say... What am I going on to say? As blood arrives at the heart via the inferior and superior vena cava, it empties to the right atria of the heart. I've said heart twice. It empties into the right atria. Wasn't expecting a stream. What's going on? So I'm trying to focus on my PT qualification. So we are together working on writing a answer to this current question, which is, what is the main function of the cardiovascular system in the human body? We just learned a lot about the sinoatrial and atrioventricular nodes, which is somewhere my knowledge was somewhat lacking. Still is, to be fair, but less so. As blood arrives at the heart via the inferior and superior vena cava, assisted by negative pressure gradients within these vessels, it empties into the right atria. Okay. Prompted by the specialized neuromuscular structure, prompted by specialized neurostructure known as the sinoatrial node, or pacemaker, I can see I would fail this exam, Like, it pumps blood to keep you alive. I mean, that is accurate. Prompted by the specialized neuromuscular structure known as the sinoatrial node or pacemaker. Pacemaker, blood, then we want to talk about, because the negative pressure that helps, because I mean we're talking about the inferior, right, and superior vena cava. Now, superior vena cava, obviously, as the blood enters, it's assisted somewhat by gravity most of the time. Inferior vena cava, it really benefits from having that negative pressure, and that negative pressure is produced by the heart itself, right? By the widening of the lumen or the structure of the atria, by its expansion, right? Forming that negative pressure in that vessel, assisting the blood in filling the atria. It's like when you put a bottle into water and you've pushed it and then you let it go and the water comes up into the bottle. That's essentially what's happening with the atria or the right atria of the heart. So it'd be nice if we can sort of conceptualize that or describe that accurately. Prompted by the specialized neuromuscular known as the sinoatrial node, it empties into the right atria. I think emptied is we can do better with that word. Assisted by negative pressure gradients. Maybe we can combine this into one sentence. As blood arrives at the heart via the inferior and superior vena cava, it is assisted by negative pressure gradients within these vessels. It's assisted in its passage, in its passage to the right atria. As blood arrives at the heart's right atria via the inferior and superior vena cava, is assisted in its passage by negative pressure gradients within these vessels. Nice. Yeah, vessels. Within these vessels. But these the negative pressure is caused by the dilation of the atria prompted by the specialized neuromuscular structure known as the sinoatrial node or pacemaker. Dilation prompted by the combined sequential actions of specialized neuromuscular structures known as the sinoatrial node, pacemaker, the atrioventricular node. The negative pressure is caused by the dilation of the atria, prompted by the combined sequential actions of specialized neuromuscular structures known as the sinoatrial node, pacemaker, and the atrioventricular node. The negative pressure is caused by the dilation of the atria, prompted by the combined sequential actions actions of specialized neuromuscular structures known as the sinoatrial node, pacemaker, and the atrioventricular. Do we need to say node twice? Sinoatrial pacemaker and the atrial. I think we do need to say node twice. Ah, God. Node. Yeah. Stuff like this where dyslexia kills my chances too. In fairness, people, it's not easy without dyslexia. Right. I reckon we can probably smooth out that sentence or anything like it. Smooth out that passage at some point. Right. Negative pressure is caused by the dilation of the atria. Let's see if we can formulate this better. It's caused by the dilation of the atria. This dilation, as well as the subsequent contraction, which will push my word. Yeah, we can use push, which will push as well as the subsequent contraction. Funneling? What's a better word than push, right? The negative pressure. So when I say this dilation as well as the subsequent contraction, forcing blood through the, what would it be, the tricuspid or mitral valve, is prompted by the combined sequential actions of specialized neuromuscular structures known as the sinoatrial node and atrioventricular node. But that's a mouthful. That's a long sentence. This dilation, as well as the subsequent contraction, blood through the tricuspid, mitral valve is prompted by the combined sequential actions of specialized neuromuscular structures known as the sinoatrial node and the atrioventricular node. Do you really need a different word? Well, I want to imply the... I mean, no, I don't. How does this lead to you, chat? As blood arrives at the heart's right atria via the inferior and superior vena cava, maybe there should be a comma there, is assisted in its passage by negative pressure gradients within these vessels. The negative pressure is caused by the dilation of the atria. This dilation, as well as the subsequent contraction, it doesn't read right. This dilation, as well as the subsequent contraction, forcing blood through the tricuspid mitral valve, is prompted by the combined sequential actions. Maybe I think we can get away with a semicolon there. This dilation, as well as the subsequent contraction, forcing blood through the tricuspid or mitral valve, is prompted by the combined sequential actions of specialized neuromuscular structures known as the sinoatrial and atrioventricular node. What is the main function of the cardiovascular system? Where are we at in... So this covers the first structure, as well as the subsequent contraction. Blood through the tricuspid mitral valve is prompted by the combined sequential actions of specialized neuromuscular structures known as the sinoatrial node atrioventricular node. These areas or these structures we said we weren't going to talk about the systolic and diastolic phases. Dilation as well as... We need to talk about pulmonary pressure, which means we should move on to respiration. But I feel like we've ended at this point of this section, we've ended talking about the tricuspid valve. We need to talk about the contraction of the right ventricle, which passes blood through the pulmonary semilunar valve toward the heart via the pulmonary arteries. So I think we should add one sentence getting to that point, and then we can talk about respiration, or inhalation, producing that pulmonary pressure, getting the blood to that position for gas exchange to take place, which is point number 3. Oh, hey Steve, do you know what body part is the last to die? Your pupils, they dilate. You know, I didn't think anyone would be able to get banned on a on a study stream, but there you go. Okay. By the combined sequential actions specializing in the muscular structures known as the sinoatrial node and the atrioventricular node. Structures manage the diastolic heart phases, ensuring what's a word? Ensuring regular, consistent, what a word that means more, implies some sort of danger if there's a failure. Implies... What's a good word, chat? Come on, we can come up with something. These structures manage the systolic and diastolic heart phases, ensuring safe, ensuring a... Because there's lots of heart rhythms that are regular, that are safe, that are effective, right? You can have a heart beating faster or slower and it not be sort of irregular, it not be dangerous. So I'm looking for some kind of word that encapsulates that. These structures manage the systolic and diastolic heart phases, ensuring safe and efficient, efficacious, efficacious heart rhythm. That might work. Efficacious heart rhythm. Structures manage the systolic and diastolic heart phases, ensuring efficacious heart rhythm. I'm not sure efficacious works. And we'll leave it for now. Ensuring efficacious heart rhythm. this sequential dilation and contraction then forces blood from the right ventricle into or through the pulmonary, pulmonary semi-lunar valve into the pulmonary arteries, Let's see. We've got to remember that we're gonna have to cite studies effectively ensuring these structures manage the systolic and diastolic heart phases, effectively ensuring these structures manage the systolic and diastolic heart phases. What if we do the antithesis? What if we say preventing irregular heart rhythms? These structures manage the systolic and diastolic heart phases. Ideal function in proper function, they prevent regular heart rhythms. Yeah, that might work. This sequential dilation and contraction enforces the blood from the right ventricle from the pulmonary semilunar valve into the pulmonary arteries. How much do we want to describe breathing here? Because the cardiovascular system does have interface with the pulmonary system very obviously, but the cardiovascular system in itself is considered separate, anatomically speaking, from the cardiovascular system, so far as I understand it. So probably spending time explaining sort of the functions of the diaphragm is tangential at best to the question, so we can potentially abbreviate a certain amount of the answer here. We want to get to sort of gas exchange, like removal of CO2, and then breathing out potentially. So what's a single sort of sentence that we can use to describe the action of breathing? Let's see. Via expansion of the chest cavity. Do we talk about diaphragm? Do we talk about assistive respiratory muscles. You just leave it like that. Via expansion of the chest cavity, air is moved into the low pressure aided with the lungs. Via expansion of the chest cavity, air is moved into the low pressure created within the lungs. Trying to think of how it's meant to be a PT exam. Yes, not a medical exam. Yes, quite right. But there's no reason to just go fuck it and do surface level work. Via expansion of the chest cavity, air is moved into the low pressure area created within the lungs. So we could talk about the bronchus, bronchioles, segmental bronchioles, terminal bronchioles, short segmental, long segmental. We could go really deep. We don't need to. We need to describe blood being at the alveoli, which are sort of wet structures with thin walls, perfect for gas exchange. Perfect for mass diffusion. We could talk about sort of like early cells conducted gas exchange via diffusion without sort of mass diffusion. It was just literally, surface area contact, but that's because the air had a very short distance to travel, whereas in humans we bring a huge amount of air as close as we can to our pulmonary capillaries in order to do that gas exchange. And even then, a huge amount of the oxygen isn't actually obtained. It's like 4% or something. Via expansion of the chest cavity, air is moved into low pressure created within the lungs. Through sequence of, I can't say bifurcating because it does more than bifurcate. Through a series of, although does bifurcating work in this context? Does bifurcating specifically mean split into two? I mean, it says bi, so I guess so. Define bifurcation. Division of something into two branches or parts. Hey ChatGPT, is there a word like bifurcation for more than 3 splits? I'd be curious. Trifurcation, quadrification, multiplication. Ooh, okay, interesting. Polytomy. Used in biology and logic for nodes splitting into multiple branches. Interesting. Ramification. Emphasizes branching or spreading out without specifying number. Divergence. Multiplication. Okay, so through a sequence of multiplicating. No? Multiplicating vessels. Vessels, passageways. More appropriate for the flow of air, I think. Through a sequence of multiplication passageways, air arrives at the alveolar sacs, wet structures of epithelial tissue specialized for gas exchange. Multiplications. Through a sequence of multiplicating passageways. So, through a series of multiplications. Might be more efficient. Multiplications. Through a series of multiplications. Mortifications. It doesn't like multiplications. It lies at the alveolar sacs, wet structures of epithelial tissue. I assume they're epithelial. Alveolar tension. Tiny air sacs in your lungs. Are alveoli made of epithelial tissue? Yes. Single layer flattened epithelial tissues, simple squamous epithelium. Cool, okay. I would have imagined that being the case. Okay. In a sequence of multiplicating passageways, air arrives at the alveolar sacs, wet structures of epithelial tissue specialized for gas exchange. Should specify layering and shape. As is tradition, simple squamous epithelial tissue specialized for gas exchange. It is here through mass diffusion that oxygen and carbon dioxide I want to use diffuse again. It is here are exchanged across in the interstitial spaces. Changed across the interstitial spaces, moving from alveoli into pulmonary capillaries. Nice. By expansion of the chest cavity, air is moved into the low pressure created within the lungs. Through a sequence of multiplicating passageways, air arrives at the alveolar sacs, wet structures of simple squamous epithelial tissue specialized for gas exchange. It is here, through mass diffusion, that oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged across the interstitial spaces, moving from the alveoli into the pulmonary capillaries. Nice. Reads fairly legibly, I think. Moving from the alveoli into the pulmonary capillaries. So, newly oxygenated blood is collected into venules. Actually, it wouldn't be venules in this context, it would be arterioles. No, arterioles. Or would it be venules? Because the pulmonary veins are they're the only veins in the human body that actually carry oxygenated blood. So, I'd be curious. This is a difficult question. Is blood collected from alveoli sacs into venules or arterioles? I know it's collected via capillaries, but surrounding into venules, according to AI. Yeah, I mean, that does make sense, to be honest. Okay, let's branch on his own. Let's see if we've got any specific explanation. You should divide a further 7 times into respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts, finally into alveolar sacs that contain holes in the walls called the alveolar pores. Similar to the other organs in the body, organization of the bronchioles and alveoli allows a larger surface area of cells to be contained within the tight space of the thoracic chest. This exchange occurs in the respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts, and alveoli. Seems to describe the gas exchange happening in other places other than the alveoli, so I might need to search that. Interesting. Alright, so I'm assuming, let's do a bit more, I want to get this confirmation. I want to know blood is picked up by the pulmonary veins, and veins arise from venules, so it really has to be venules. Newly oxygenated blood is collected into venules in the pulmonary veins. Transport blood to the left atrium. Nice. Transport the blood to the left atrium. Gases that remained or was diffused to be alveolar and bronchi was diffused into the alveolar and bronchioles managed by pressure gradients. It's managed by pressure gradients produced by explanation and the contraction of the lungs and thoracic cavity. Okay. Gases that remained or were diffused into the alveoli and bronchioles are gases that remain or were diffused into the alveoli and bronchioles. Into the alveoli and bronchioles are managed by pressure gradients produced by expiration, and the contraction produced by expiration and the contraction of the lungs and thoracic cavity. Okay, so we've arrived at the left atrium. Now we need to talk about the oxygenation of tissues, which means we need to get to systemic circulation. So we can do that. Let's do... Newly oxygenated blood is connected into venules and the pulmonary veins, which transport blood to the left atrium. Via aforementioned cycle, the aforementioned cardiac cycle. Cardiac cycle is collected into venules and then the pulmonary veins, transport blood to the left atrium, prompted by the dilation. Why do I always spell this wrong? By dilation of... God dang it. Prompted by the dilation of... Newly oxygenated blood is collected into venules and then the pulmonary veins, which transport blood to the left atrium, prompted by the dilation of... Transport blood to the left atrium. Along the flow of pressure caused by the dilation of the heart's left atrium. The newly oxygenated blood is collected into venules and then the pulmonary veins, which transport blood along the flow of pressure caused by the dilation of the heart's left atrium. Transport blood along the flow of pressure caused by the dilation of the heart's left atrium. Transports, which the newly oxygenated blood is collected into venules and in the pulmonary veins, which transports pulmonary veins, which transport, not transports, which transport blood along the flow of pressure caused by the dilation of the heart's left atrium. Transport blood along the flow of pressure caused by the dilation of its destination, the heart's left atrium. Transport blood along the flow of pressure caused by the dilation of its destination, the heart's left atrium. Gases that remain or were diffused into the alveoli and bronchi are managed by pressure gradients produced by expiration and the contraction of the lungs and thoracic cavity. Expiration is the contraction of the lungs and thoracic cavity, so this is superfluous. Are managed by pressure gradients produced by the contraction of the lungs and thoracic cavity. Nice. Okay, the aforementioned cardiac cycle, talking about, we want to get to systemic circulation. Gases that remain or fused into the alveoli. Left atrium. It's the bicuspid valve on the left, yes? Which valve between left atrium and ventricle? Wait, it's the mitral valve? Bicuspid on the left side? Really? I think I've turned that wrong then. Is it tricuspid valve on the right side, yeah? Tricuspid valve on the right side. But I've termed that the mitral valve. Okay, let's go back and find where I've done that then. Mitral. Yeah. Dilation as well as subsequent contraction, forcing blood through the... So the bicuspid is the mitral, not the tricuspid. Okay. Go away. Okay, cool, glad I caught that. Cool. Right atrium, right ventricle, lovely. Cool, let's look at tricuspid. Blood arrives at the heart's right atrium. Negative pressure, forcing blood through the tricuspid valve is prompted by the combined sequential contractions. Structures manage the systolic and diastolic heart phases. In proper function, they prevent irregular heart rhythms. The sequential dilation and contraction then forces the blood from the right ventricle through the pulmonary semilunar valve into the pulmonary arteries. Via expansion of the chest cavity, air is moved into the low pressure created within the lungs. Through a sequence of multiplicating passageways, air arrives at the alveolar sacs, wet structures of simple squamous epithelial tissue specialized for gas exchange. It is here, through mass diffusion, that oxygen the primary exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs across the interstitial spaces, moving from the alveoli into the pulmonary capillaries. Moving from occurs across the interstitial spaces, moving into the pulmonary capillaries. Newly oxygenated blood is collected into venules and then the pulmonary veins, which transport blood along the flow of pressure caused by the dilation of its destination, the heart's left atrium. Gases that remain or were diffused into the alveoli and bronchioles are managed by pressure gradients produced by the contraction of the lungs and thoracic cavity. The aforementioned cardiac cycle... Right. Then forces blood through the bicuspid mitral valve into the left atrium, whereupon the next systolic phase it moves through the aortic valve and into systemic circulation. The aforementioned cardiac cycle then forces blood through the bicuspid or mitral valve into the left atrium, whereupon the next systolic phase it moves through the aortic valve and into systemic circulation. Into the left ventricle. Whereupon the next systolic phase, it moves through the aortic valve and into systemic circulation. Nice. Systemic circulation refers to the huge Does systemic circulation refer only to the efferent structures? Let's see. Does systemic circulation include efferent vasculature? Sorry, I meant afferent. Okay. Right, so it does include... Yeah, okay. Aforementioned cardiac cycle then forces blood from the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle, whereupon the next systolic phase it moves through the aortic valve and into systemic circulation. Systemic circulation refers to the vasculature Ooh! Impact! Thank you for the sub, young fellow. Awesome to get some of those while I'm doing my coursework. Systemic circulation refers to the vascular transporting blood to nearly all cells and structures within body, transporting blood to and from nearly all cells and structures within the body. It's composed of arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins. It's vessels. Vessels are composed of arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins. Reported for cheating on Twitch. How am I cheating? Vessels are composed of arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins. These... What's another word for vessels? Let's ask ChatGPT, shall we? Hey, ChatGPT, do my coursework for me. Come up with another word. What's another word for vessels? Yeah, a boat. God damn it. Vasculature, circulatory vessels, conduits. Oh, there's an interesting one. Conduits is good. Carriers, pipelines. I see. Want me to ban him? I mean, yes, but you shouldn't. Let's see. These... What was that word? It was a good word, ChatGPT, I swear. I haven't completely forgotten it. Conduits. I mean, it's not really appropriate in this circumstance, I don't think. Refers to the systemic circulation, refers to the vasculature. Does systemic circulation only refer to the vasculature? Does systemic circulation only include the vasculature? Systemic circulation involves the heart's left side and the entire network of blood vessels. Okay. Gotcha. Okay, so we should change the terminology here. Systemic circulation refers to includes parts of the heart, primarily the vasculature transporting blood to and from nearly all cells and structures within the body. Its vessels are composed of arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins. This network... What do we want to say about the systemic circulation? This network ensures that muscles, tissues, have the substances required to carry out their functions. muscles, tissues, and other metabolic structures have the substances required to carry out their functions, as well as providing a flow into which to deposit waste substances for disposal. Substances. Where's cloud control when you need it? That would be somewhat unhelpful right now. Okay, so I believe. Oh, we want to get to waste substances for disposal. These include excess carbon dioxide, dead cells, interstitial fluid. What else would be dumped into the blood as waste?
Bluemobile will come to you.
Tell me more, Bluemobile.
On 133032.
Tell me more, Bluemobile. Bluemobile can do the lots.
All more offers on the spot.
There's just one thing you need to do.
133032.
For everything mechanical
They'll fix the car.
Bluemobile will come to you. 133032.
That's 133032.
God damn it. Okay. These include excess carbon dioxide, dead cells, interstitial fluid. What else is considered waste material? I mean, dead cells covers a lot, right? Dead cells include excess carbon dioxide. This waste includes excess carbon dioxide, dead cells, and interstitial fluid. Can you buy Lysol? Oh, can't use the word Lysol? Your head is full of CO2? Thanks. Can you buy uprising of venules? Then veins. It's a better way of putting that for sure. Can you burn uprising of venules and then veins? Capillary beds. This material is transported via the combined mechanisms of valves within veins, pressure gradients, and the committantes. Can never spell that. What's the term? Come on. veini, venia comitantes. Yeah, there we go. Now we're spelling it right. Huzzah. Okay, nice. Tiltmat with the Prime sub, 71 months. Hot damn, Fancer, thank you. Okay. Valves within veins, pressure gradients, and vena comitantes, which utilize systolic blood pressure of arteries to ease circulation. Carried by analyzing the venules and veins from their capillary beds, this material is transported via the combined mechanisms of valves within veins, pressure gradients, and vena comitantes, which utilize the systolic blood pressure of arteries to ease circulation. Damn, son, you began early today? Well, I'm doing my PT qualification, so I don't know how long I've been on. We've done one question so far. Well, we haven't even done it, but we're nearly there. Of course, we need to then go and find citations for what we've written and cite them in Harvard style. So we want to go for, venules, veins, and inferior, superior vena cava. To ease circulation. Let's see. This material is transported via the combined mechanisms of valves within veins, pressure gradients, and vena comitantes, which utilize the systolic blood pressure of arteries to ease circulation. Upon arrival near the heart via the inferior superior vena cava, is then assisted by negative venous pressure, then assisted by negative venous pressure. Then it is then further assisted by negative venous pressure by somehow I feel closer to you today as we sit here, you studying and I'm coding VBA for my DRV sheet. Yeah, you and me and you together. Product arrival near the heart via the inferior and superior vena cava is then further assisted by negative venous pressure by atrial dilation. in summary, love writing those words, in summary, cardiovascular system is a cyclic network interwoven passageways, vessels, structures. Cyclic network of interwoven passageways, vessels, and structures. Provide fuel to metabolic interwoven passageways, vessels, and structures function synergistically How do I conclude this chat? In summary, the cardiovascular system is a cyclic network of interwoven passageways, vessels, and structures that function synergistically to provide the required material for metabolic function. To provide required material for metabolic function. To subsequently remove material produced by function. Produced by that function. Produced by those processes. So I think, chat, that is a decent answer. How many words are we at? 475, so right in the middle of my requirements. So, yeah, that's decent. Let's have a read through again and see if we feel like it's good. If it is, we're going to go through and we're going to look at any claims that we make and try and find some citations to support them. And maybe if we find a study that has a quote that we feel is really related, we can put it in as a block quote. We shall see. The main function... Okay, so the question, what is the main function of the cardiovascular system in the human body? The main function of the cardiovascular system is to provide necessary oxygen to cells and tissues and remove excess carbon dioxide produced by metabolism. Wasserman and Saitzema, 1988. maybe one that I placed the study because it's 40 years old. As blood arrives at the heart's right atria via the inferior and superior vena cava, it's assisted in its passage by negative pressure gradients within these vessels. The negative pressure is caused by the dilation of the atria. This dilation, as well as the subsequent contraction, forcing blood through the tricuspid valve, is prompted by the combined sequential actions of specialized neuromuscular structures known as the sinoatrial node, pacemaker, and the atrioventricular node. These structures manage the systolic and diastolic heart phases. In proper function, they prevent irregular heart rhythms. This sequential dilation and contraction then forces the blood from the right ventricle through the pulmonary semilunar valve into the pulmonary arteries. Via expansion of the chest cavity, air is moved into the low pressure created within the lungs. I think maybe into the pulmonary arteries. What's a word that means happening at the same time? Meanwhile? Feels a bit too informal. Chat, what's a formal word for meanwhile? That's a question. In the interim, concurrently is a good word. Concurrently. In parallel. I like that. In parallel. In parallel. In parallel, via expansion, the chest cavity, air is moved into the low pressure created within the lungs. Through a sequence of modificating passageways, air arrives at the alveolar sacs, wet structures of simple squamous epithelial tissue specialized for gas exchange. It is here, through mass diffusion, that the primary exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs across the interstitial spaces, diffusing into the pulmonary capillaries. The newly oxygenated blood is collected into venules and then the pulmonary veins, which transport blood along the flow of pressure caused by the dilation of its destination, the heart's left atrium. Gases that remain or are diffused into the alveoli and bronchioles are managed by pressure gradients produced by the contraction of the lungs and thoracic cavity. The aforementioned cardiac cycle then forces blood through the bicuspid mitral valve into the left ventricle, where upon the next systolic phase it moves through the aortic valve and into systemic circulation. Systemic circulation includes parts of the heart and primarily the vasculature, transporting blood to and from nearly all cells and structures within the body. Its vessels are composed of arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins. This network ensures that muscles, tissues, and other metabolic structures have the substances required to carry out their functions, as well as providing a flow into which to deposit waste substances for disposal. This waste includes excess carbon dioxide, dead cells, and interstitial fluid. Carried by an uprising of venules and then veins from their capillary beds, this material is transported via the combined mechanisms of valves within veins, pressure gradients, and venae comitantes, which utilize the systolic blood pressure of arteries to ease circulation. Upon arrival near the heart via the inferior and superior vena cava, it is then further assisted by negative venous pressure caused by atrial dilation. In summary, the cardiovascular system is a cyclic network of interwoven passageways, vessels, and structures that work synergistically to provide the required material for metabolic function and to subsequently remove the waste material produced by these processes. So, I reckon that's a decent answer to the question. Let's look at where we might need to insert citations. As blood arrives at the heart's right atria via inferior and superior vena cava, it's assisted in its passage by negative pressure gradients within these vessels. Let's see if there's been any work done. Can you point me to any academic journal articles discussing the pressure in the inferior and superior vena cava? Curious to see if it finds anything. Venous pressure measurements in the superior and inferior vena cava. That looks exactly like something we want to look at. To investigate the relationship of pressure in the inferior vena cava with A, pressure in the superior vena cava, B, intra-abdominal pressure as measured in the urinary bladder. Prospective study of 38 mechanically ventilated patients. Simultaneous measurements of PSVC, PIVC, and PCYST. 151 sets of measurements were performed. Measurements divided into Group A, PCYST, under 10 mmHg. Group B, 10 mmHg. Or, I do not know what this terminology is. Statistical analysis was performed with paired t-test, Pearson correlation, results are expressed in mean plus minus SEN. Might be worth asking ChatGPT what, if it can explain this further. Can you explain this in simple terminology? Measurements split into 3 groups based on pressure levels. Ah, it's a pressure measurement. I see. Same person measured under 2 conditions. Pearson correlation. I need to know what the Pearson correlation is, so we will look up that. Even more simply, they rank results by low, medium, and high pressure, use standard statistical methods to compare and relate measurements. Okay. What is Pearson correlation? Measures the strength and direction of a linear relationship between 2 continuous variables, resulting in a coefficient from -1 to +1, where +1 is a perfect positive correlation. I see, okay. Gotcha. 0.7. Ah, makes sense. Okay. R0. Nice. Cool. Makes sense. What are we looking at? In groups A and B, not significantly different, and they were highly correlated. Okay, so this is a study that is adjusting them or testing the dependence of the variation depending on intra-abdominal pressure, which is not specifically what we're after. Let's see. Comparative measurement of pressure. That might be more relevant. Ultrasonography of inferior vena cava to determine central venous pressure. Comparison of central venous pressure in the superior vena cava and common iliac vein, particularly ill patients. correlation between central venous pressure and collapsibility. Inferior vena cava collapsibility index versus central venous pressure for intravascular volume assessment. Interesting. This is why I can claim I'm not cheating when using AI to help me code. I spotted partial citations in the code and was like, what the fuck? So I asked, was it typographical error? A hallucination / fragment on the NI generation process. Yeah, I mean, AI has its use cases, absolutely. I never want to rely on AI for sort of specific like studies or anything like that, but I will use it to aid in explanation of text or to reformat a particular thing or to give me a different way of looking at something that I've already verified, you know? Comparative measurement of pressure in the abdominal inferior vena cava and the superior. Abdominal inferior vena cava pressure was compared to intrathoracic central venous pressure for the adults. 90 measurements were obtained. Limits of alignment between below. Predicted central venous pressure in adults. See. Abstract. Okay. I think these studies are a bit too specific to sort of their purpose for sort of diagnostic criteria. We're looking for something broader, describing the presence of negative pressure. Is there negative pressure within superior inferior vena cava? Are we still on the first question? Yes, we are. Vector pressure on venous flow model. Central venous pressure measurement. Let's see. Velocity of blood flow. Inferior vena cava. Factors promoting venous return. Inferior vena cava is a large right transperitoneal vessel formed by the confluence of the right and left common iliac veins. Anatomically, this usually occurs at the L5 vertebral level. The iliac vein inferior vena cava lies along the right anterolateral aspect of vertebral columns, passes through the central tendon of the diaphragm around T8 vertebral level. Inferior vena cava is a large blood vessel responsible for transporting deoxygenated blood from the lower extremities and abdomen back to the right atrium of the heart. It has the largest diameter of the venous system and is a thin-walled vessel. These anatomic characteristics make it ideal for transporting large quantities of venous blood. Many veins contain one-way valves to ensure forward flow of blood back to the heart. The IVC, however, does not contain such valves, and forward flow to the heart is driven by the differential pressure created by normal respiration. Created by respiration. As the diaphragm contracts and creates negative pressure in the chest, the pressure gradient pulls the venous blood from the abdominal IVC into the thoracic IVC and subsequently into the right heart. IVC enters the right atrium of the heart after coursing through the diaphragm, entering the posterior inferior aspect of the atrium. Due to that, Interesting. So what I'm looking at here is that I may be wrong to state that the negative pressure gradient is caused by the actions of the heart itself, though the heart's job is to provide a pressure gradient. So positive external pressure is said to decrease transmural pressure. Negative pressure in the pleural cavity is widely believed to result in negative pressure in systemic chest veins. The discrepancy between iliac column height and foot venous pressure has been explained on this basis. Discrepancy between foot venous pressure and iliac venous column height was shown in this experimental model to be a result of two flows in opposite directions, superior and inferior vena cava, meaning at the zero reference level in the heart, the upper column pressure therefore does not register in the foot. Positive external pressure results in slowing of velocity with conversion to pressure. Internal and transmural pressures therefore do not decrease. Negative external pressure has only a marginal effect on flow. Importantly, internal pressure does not become negative. In an experimental setup, it was shown that negative pressure in chest veins was not necessary for air embolism to occur. Conclusion: persistent negative pressure in systemic chest veins probably does not occur. The reason for the discrepant foot venous pressure is likely to be a result of dynamic flow and not negative pressure in chest veins. External positive pressure results in slowing of velocity, but the transmural pressure remains largely unchanged. Interesting. Effect of external positive, negative pressure on venous flow. Positive external pressure is said to decrease transmural pressure. Negative pressure in the pleural cavity is widely believed to result in negative pressure in systemic chest veins. Just like this, didn't I? This is just the full text, I assume. That's why it's important to cite your sources, because sometimes your sources tell you that you're full of shit. Positive external. It's called methods based on static closed models that may not be appropriate. Study examined effects of external pressures. Flow in the Penrose drain. Discrepancy of showers. Probably does not occur. Because veins are thin-walled and collapsible, a non-linear pressure-volume relationship prevails, and they are subject to the influence of external pressure, positive or negative. That would work with what was suggested earlier, which is that the pressure in the inferior and superior vena cava is actually as a result of the dynamics of breathing itself, or respiration itself, the pressure gradients formed by the respiratory musculature. Interesting. Okay, well, I certainly need to put more research into this because I don't want to be spouting bollocks. But for now, I'm going to call it. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm glad you absolutely enjoyed and was so engaged by me staring at a screen and typing words occasionally for many hours. But yeah, thank you very, very much for your time, and I'll probably be streaming tonight. I don't know if Peabody wants to do some monster hunting tonight. I'd certainly be up for it. You can send me a DM and let me know. Think I can if I don't get a headache. Sounds good to me, Peabody. Contact me on Discord. Alright. Bye bye, everyone. Farewell.